November 1996. Three expert jumpers were concentrating on the marine existence of the Cannes Sound Wall while they were plunging close squaw. 7 days prior, they had put some traps. Today, they intend to assemble the examples and perform more estimations with many jumps under their belts. Every one of the three of these individuals were prepared jumpers, so them three had a joint encounter of very nearly 1,000 plunges. Two of the men, Brett and Robbie, began gathering tests when they arrived at the profundity of the snares, which is around 220 ft or 67 m. While checking their profundity and time pole, the third man spotted two maritime white-tip sharks swimming far away along the wall. Since the men were prepared jumpers, they were totally enamored with this. Referring to sharks is a typical event while making a plunge. The sea, these vast water species were uncommonly tremendous, estimating around 14 ft long, and it was strange to see them so close to land. Consequently, the three men enjoyed some time off from their work to snap a couple photographs. They worked at profundity for the distributed 15 minutes or so, and were around part of the way through their jump. This demonstrated that the time had come to get back to the surface in their rising arrangement. Robbie would go first, followed by Brett and Pole at the top. Robbie, for a few obscure reasons, had been breathing somewhat seriously during the plunge, so as they began to rise, his air perusing was a little lower than typical. Brett taught him to continue to a shallower profundity. Then Brett began to swim too, and saw that Robbie was guiding down toward where Bar was, who was still down on the wall. Looking lower, Brett saw that Bar was completely encased in sediment, looking like a dust storm. Brett figured Pole could have had a hose split, allowing air to shoot up and kicking up residue on the wall. Brett swam down to see whether he wanted any help, as this likewise implied that he may be spilling air and could require an extra. Shockingly, it was anything but a hose by any means. As he entered the sediment cloud and got a more critical look, he made a chilling revelation. Bar had a huge indentation on his leg, which Brett acknowledged while he attempted to snatch and pull him. While he was handling what he was seeing, the shark came in for another assault, putting them both in a critical circumstance. Battling frantically, they endeavored to strike the shark's gills to ward it off. During this furious battle, a subsequent shark entered the scene, grasping on Pole's calf, making the residue become crimson. Soon after, the principal shark returned, clipping onto Bar's thigh, with re-established hostility, powerfully hauling him despite the fact that Brett was pulling hard the other way. The shark was serious areas of strength, for excessively pulled both of them directly past the brink of the drop-off as they dove down the wall. Basically in a free fall, the two of them battled savagely against the sharks while quickly spending the little air they had left. At a point, Brett checked his profundity measure and saw it maximized at 325 ft, demonstrating they were sliding past its perusing limit at last. A short delay in the shark's assault permitted Brett to maneuver them into a little sandy bay inside the wall. That was where he at last got a more clear image of Bar's condition, and to his skepticism, he saw that Bar had almost cut off his whole left leg. He likewise experienced serious chomps to his chest and stomach, and most of the tissue was gone. His condition was terrible, and they had brief period. Each squandered second carried his companion nearer to his death. After seeing this, Brett essentially went into full frenzy mode and got Bar and fired swimming up as hard as possible. Yet inside only a couple of moments, the sharks returned and snatched Bar again, pulling the both back down the wall. And as though things couldn't deteriorate, Brett went to slowly inhale, and it seemed like he was getting the air through a straw. This implied that he had only a couple of breaths left before he was all the way out of air. Then one more second after the fact, the sharks tore Bar right, no longer any of his concern, and Brett observed powerlessly as they pulled him more profound into the water, practically out of air. Now himself, there was simply nothing he could do to help Bar any longer, so he needed to pull together on saving himself. Sadly, he wound up floating at almost 400 ft beneath the surface, with sparse air staying in a terrified free, for all he started a frenzied rising towards the surface. During this climb, a look at his profundity measure uncovered a steady red line at 325. In the midst of the staggering profundity alarm and the beginning of nitrogen narcosis, his particular spotlight was on executing energetic musical kicks toward the weak light over a large number of strokes. His vision steadily transformed into a passage-like viewpoint as he swam this exclusive. Focus got increasingly small until he had one last thought, which was that he was so close, and that he dropped around 30 FE from the surface in a fortunate turn of events his lightness gadget held barely sufficient air to raise him to the surface, permitting his head to rise out of the water. Then the strain contrast constrained him to breathe out and launched his breathing, and he awakened panting for air, pausing for a minute to study his environmental elements and handle the grouping of occasions. He understood the dismal reality. Robbie the third colleague had previously withdrawn to look for help. The unpleasant picture of the two of them vanishing over the wall soaked in blood persuaded Robbie to expect to be the most terrible and earnestly look for help. Rising up out of the significant profundities, Brett's quick climb set off the beginning of decompression disorder. The direness to arrive at the shore grasped him, realizing that any defer gambled with obviousness or even loss of motion coming to permit waters. He immediately removed his scuba gear and ran towards the closest couple near the ocean. In a short of breath exposure, recognized himself and made sense of his conditioned decompression ailment. Earnestly he gave insights regarding his truck, the area of his keys, and the presence of crisis guidelines on the dashboard. As he finished up these basic directions, Brett dropped. Yet again, oblivious. Fortunately, destiny was his ally as fortune leaned toward Brett. The couple he experienced turned out to be a specialist and a medical caretaker knowledgeable in decompression disorder. Hurrying to his truck, they recovered the guidelines and quickly advanced toward a close-by INS telephone. Since there were no decompression chambers on the island, they told the Marine lab where he worked, and they quickly dispatched a medevac plane to recover him. From that point he was taken from Croix and traveled to Puerto Rico in a dreamlike development. The plane confronted an oxygen deficiency, requiring a crisis arrival on an expressway. The grouping went on with a planned helicopter arriving to cover the excess distance to the emergency clinic. At last conceded, Brett started his excursion towards a practically full recuperation for certain. Persevering through impacts from the decompression disorder, unfortunately, Paul's body has never been recuperated. Offer this video a go ahead and remark down underneath in the event that you partook in their video. It will assist in helping our recordings in the YouTube calculation with buying in for additional recordings. Thank you.